Welcome to Innersight, Health Optimization with Rudy and Shaun.
Okay. Good afternoon, gentlemen. We've got a returning guest today, Shaun, podcast number 20. And with the new year comes New Year resolutions. And people thinking about New Year resolutions always think about a better body. And so welcome to 2025. This is our first recording. And the previous one was a rebroadcast. We had a very positive feedback on the Iron podcast, so we rebroadcasted that one in December. But today we've got Hannes back. Hannes is a biokineticist, and he's been on, I think, episode number 8 when we talked about balance. I think maybe for those that don't know Hannes, maybe you can just give a little intro about your background and where and what you do at the moment.
Yeah, sure. No, thank you. It's nice to be back. I'm a biokineticist. I practice in Durbanville and in Cape Town city centre. I primarily focus on runners, in everything from mainly running injuries and treatment of running related injuries and conditions. Also some conditioning and assessments and those type of things. But I do see a few cyclists as well. But yeah, so that's mainly what I focus on. I've been working in Cape Town for almost 7.5, 8 years now. So yeah.
So today we're going to mainly talk about running, but obviously in our practice, exercise is very important, and we hammer on exercise. I think there's no pill on the market that can mimic any closely what exercise can do for you in the long run.
Yeah, I think that the data shows that in your longevity markers that you get a 20 to 30% increase in your lifespan, and that's not to say what will be in your health span. But the problem is not everyone is a runner or is running yet, but we are bipedal and we should be able to all get to a type of running. And I think that's why we've got Hannes here. He was a little bit light on how he described himself. He's a biokineticist focused on running, and he's a running expert, and that's why we've got him here. And we want to draw from his expertise actually how you start running. What if someone comes off the street today and say, I want to start running? I think that's probably where you want someone. You don't actually want them 3 months in with an injury. You would want them to see them off the street. Okay, how do we start?
Yeah, so this time of year, February tends to be my busiest month in terms of running injuries. The thing with running is the rate of injuries is quite high. There's a couple of reasons for that. It's still a topic that's being researched quite extensively, but one of the reasons is with the new year, a lot of New Year's resolutions happen. The weather's quite nice. You're on holiday, so a lot of people start taking up running. But the problem with running is we tend to underestimate the impact it has on the body and the requirements that you need to be able to run long distances. So, for example, from a strength perspective, we'll get to the fitness now, but the strength perspective, the impact on your legs are quite high. For every step that you take, it can be anything from 4 to 8 times your body weight. Impact forces at the knee, we know, is like 5 to 6. The Achilles, 8 times your body weight. Now the thing is, human body can handle that. The problem is you have to condition it though, and it's like strength training. If you go to the gym, your goal is not to run 5Ks. You want to bench press 100Ks. You're not going to start with 80Ks.
That is massive forces.
Yeah,
and I mean we often see that, like middle-aged men, they've got kids at school, and then suddenly they need to do a 100-meter sprint, and the Achilles or calf muscle goes. So it's not conditioned. I think if you're younger, you get away with more, but in the age group from about 35 plus, then it becomes a problem. You can't just run a marathon from doing nothing.
Yeah, there's the thing is, people, and I think we underestimate how hard running is on the body. if you haven't done it for 20 years, last time you ran at school. And when you're a kid, your body's quite tough and resilient and developing, so it adapts quite quickly. But now you haven't run or done anything for 20 years. Now you do a parents versus kids hockey game and then pull a muscle. You can't understand why. But the thing is, the hammies aren't used to that anymore. It's not conditioned. Now, the same with running. We underestimate that impact. So now when people start running, they tend to overload a structure very easily. Now, what I mean by that is it helps to understand that the body has a certain amount of load or stress that it can handle. Now, exercise is a physical stress. I like to refer to it as load or running load. Now, the amount of load that the body can handle is a product of the intensity of the activities you do times the volume. And very smart guy in the 2000s did a study. It's basically almost like a curve that goes like this if you have intensity and volume. For example, if you do a single leg squat in the gym, but you only do 1 repetition, that can be within your knee's capacity. But if you add 20 kilograms, suddenly the intensity goes up and it's outside, and the knee is getting sore. You can also go on a hike, which is low intensity but high volume for 6 kilometers on a flat route. The knee's okay with that. But if you add 20 kilometers, add 20 kilometers, or you are carrying like a backpack of 16 kilometers, then the knee starts getting sore, or you go down a hill where the impact forces are higher. So that line of the load that you can handle can shift up. And that's what you need to do with running. Is at the moment when you start running, or you haven't run for forever or ever in your life or a very long time, then that line for running is lower than where you want to be. You want to run a 10K, but your body's not conditioned to do that. So now what you want to do is you want to gradually build up and start at a position where you can handle it. So the problem though with running is it's not like strength training. Let's use the bench press analogy again. Instead of starting with 80Ks, you're going to start with maybe 10Ks. And then every week you add 2.5 or whatever. As you get stronger, you build it up over a long period of time. You need to do the same with running to condition your legs to be able to handle that. Okay, so it's a bit of oversimplification, but
I want to oversimplify it more. So you really need to start slow and low. So you really want to not do distance and also start with a light jog rather than a run, if I understand your graph correctly. So for the person out there, you do not go the first day and run a 5K. It just doesn't.
I think that's the biggest problem is that people, they say, okay, right, I'm going to start running now. And that's exactly what they do. They go do a 5 kilometer first time out in many years. It's difficult for people to say, okay, tonight I'm just going to walk. And tomorrow I'm going to maybe do a little jog. I find people want to get to the end goal so quickly. And a lot of people don't want to put in the time to get there, but it's so important. And I'm so glad you mentioned right at the beginning, this is your busiest time almost regarding injuries. Just to show people that, yes, you can hurt yourself and that there's a right way to actually do it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's a good point that you make, is now people ask, but how do you start at a low? Do I just run a kilometer and add a half of a kilometer? What do you need to do? So before we go to the answer to that, we have to bring in the other thing that you have to develop to become a runner. So one, you have to get your legs stronger to be able to produce enough force for a long enough period of time to be able to run, and also to be able to handle the impact of running on the joints and the muscles. The other half is that you have to get fitter to be able to do that. Now, in this context, oversimplified definition of fitness is you need to condition the body to be able to produce energy for the muscles to do the task at the intensity, at the volume that you need to do. So, but it's not just about just any fitness that you need to develop. What you do want to do is you want to differentiate between what's the goal that you want to achieve, and then also choose the right way of developing that type of fitness. So to explain that, that's if you watch the Olympics and you watch the 400 meter final and the marathon final, and you have the two winners cross the line, both of them are pushing everything the last 100 meters, and they go over the line and they both they both would tell you they're equally tired. But the one ran less than a minute, the other one more than 2 hours. Then the question is, why the difference? And that's what you have to look at. For running, endurance running, you want to be able to develop long duration training, where if you want to do 100 meters, the intensity is the important variable. With running, it's volume. So we can get into how the difference between the energy systems maybe a bit later. But to develop volume, now we know, okay, so you need to spend a lot of time on your feet for the body to adapt to on being active for a longer period of time. Now, if you start running, now you, instead of trying to run 1 kilometer and then 2 days later do another kilometer and so forth, I usually tell people, do 5 kilometers. But what you are going to do is, to get the intensity lower but keep the volume, is walk for 4 minutes and then run for 1 minute and repeat that for 5Ks. Then keep the distance for 5 kilometers, and over a period of, and it can be as long as 10, 12 weeks. It's a long process. The body adapts slowly. You run a little bit more and eventually walk a little bit less. Because let's use the knee, for example. The impact forces on the knee when you run, let's say 5-6 times body weight. For walking, I'm talking under correction here, but I think it's around 2.4 at best. So it's a lot less. And now you're spending a lot of time on your legs with a little bit of running, getting that strength adaptation with some recovery in between, but you're keeping your heart rate and your cardiovascular system at a level where it needs to adapt. And but at a low intensity. And that's the key to start to run is, I usually say 5K distance is good. Some people, it's more comfortable on 3Ks. There's a lot of variation from individual to individual. But let's say, for the argument's sake, you do 5Ks, a lot of walking, a little bit of running, and each week you switch it over until you can run 5Ks. That's step one. That's usually the first goal. If you can get to there, then the body is at a place to start building to whatever your goal is, if it's a 10 or a 21K. But so that's, I think, a good way to start. The key, though, is to be patient and do it slowly. Like I said, to go from no running to running through 5Ks without the need to walk on a flat surface, you need to, that can be anything from, it's around about 10 weeks. I've got like a very generic 10K program a 10-week program that I give to beginners and to injured runners to use them to reintroduce the load to them. That's a 10-week program. Some people, it's quicker. Other people take longer. Very individualized. So you have to, it's also,
suppose it's also your background of how much exercise you've done, or if you're doing some other exercises, will all determine how quickly you can up that time frame.
That's it, yeah. No, and so it depends on, this is where biomechanics gets drawn in as well. So if that capacity to handle load, that line, can differ for different joints and muscles. So if you've had an old ACL rugby injury in school and there's still a bit of a weakness or a deficit, for that knee, the load capacity line is going to be a little bit lower than, let's say, the ankle on the other side. So if you overload the body, there's usually the give is going to be at the weakest point. So when people come in for rehabilitation, we look at biomechanics, but I usually tell them 9 out of 10 runners end up here because of a training load error. Your progression was faster than what your body was adapting, or were you doing too much too quickly, or I've had cases where you had too little for too long. Said, I want to do a 21K, but I only ran twice a week, 5 to 7Ks, and then I did something big. So the goal was outside of your current capacity, and then you ran the 21, and then a needle pops up. So back to the session. So I said, that's probably the reason why it happened. It's a training load error. But we know there's a weakness here, and the knee's capacity to handle load was lower than what maybe the rest of the involved tissues were. Then that's what we usually target with the rehabilitation, a strengthen the weak area that might have made you more susceptible to the specific injury.
That's quite interesting. I mean, our program, the Innersight 1 program, we do the 4 legs of fitness, which is the VO2 max side, so the endurance, and then strength, flexibility and stability. And what we've been seeing is stability is actually not that big an issue for the 40-year-olds, and also strength. So somehow South African people are quite strong, but they struggle with the VO2 max side, and they struggle a little bit with the flexibility side. So, but what you can see now with running is you actually use all four of those, and actually people think it's a fitness thing, but you also have to be strong, you also have to have good balance, and you also have to be flexible. So very interesting. But the training load is almost more a strength thing than so can your body take it versus being fit enough. So you want to use the strength, but then use it in a gradual manner to get fit.
Yeah, so obviously you mentioned it. You said that a lot of people think it's the fitness, but it's actually not the fitness. It's that building up of the strength for your joints to cope with the load that you're adding, and then fitness will come in time.
Yeah, so it's the two correlate against each other. Very interesting enough. A lot of people say when I run, I can do a block and then I'm dead. So how do I improve that? And so then I say at this moment, your level of conditioning at this moment, running is a high intensity task. It should be a low or moderate intensity task. So the body has to strengthen up for it to be more comfortable with running, and that's part of the thing why you want to do it slow, is give the body capacity. Because if you are very strong, it's going to be easy to do a task. Okay, let's say let's stick with the running thing. So if your legs are stronger and they can handle the loads better, you use less energy. And let's get back to the fitness side of things, the difference between the two runners. I use the very poor analogy of the two different types of fitness, if you couldn't oversimplify it. Don't quote me on this. But the aerobic, you've got in the old days they talked about aerobic and anaerobic. Okay. And that's basically the two categories for this argument's sake. So see it as two factories that your body have. And the benefit of the aerobic factory is the energy supply, oxygen, fat, and those things. You have a really big and good supply of that. So endless supply of oxygen and so forth. So it's a factory built at a mine shaft. Loads of energy, but the problem is that energy system or that factory only has one production line. It's a slow process. The other side is your glycogen, carbohydrates, anaerobic, which people a lot refer to the anaerobic side. You have the benefit there is you've got 5-6 production lines, and so it can immediately produce a lot of energy. The problem is the sources are off-site, so you have to resupplement it. So you can use let's say, imagine a truck bringing a load of raw materials, gets used up, now you have to wait for the other one. So the person that says I'm dead by the time I'm at the end of the block is basically very dominant on this side. It's not an either or thing, but it's a spectrum. So you want to be on this side of the spectrum. So part of the
adaptation.
The adaptation, the beginning of why you want to start slow and walking is you want to start on this side of the line, on the aerobic side, because then you see it as an investment where you maybe produce another production line, and then running at one stage where it's on the far side of the energy production becomes your body becomes comfortable enough where it's an easier task. So then you can use the energy system, which has a big supply, and you can produce it. So that's where the strength and the fitness go.
So I had the fitness component because I was cycling quite a lot, and then I started running. But because you're fit, you think, I'll go do a 5 or 10 Ks. It's not a problem. I'm fit. But immediately leg pain, it turned out to be an ITB band issue at that point. But that's the other side of the equation where you do have the endurance fitness, so you can do the running. But if you do it too quickly, then that load on the muscles and the tendons that's not used to running can be a problem. Yeah. So yes, it's I hear what you say. It's important, both sides of the equation. It's not the one or the other. It's actually both.
But I like that analogy, and just to bring it back to our listeners, so the zone 2 have been asked a lot. So the zone 2 is where we're next to the mine, and you actually change that your lactic threshold is the middle, and as you change over, you then on the anaerobic side, or where you use the glycogen or the fast transport system. So I like that.
Yeah, and obviously we always talk about 80% of your exercising should be in the lower zone and only like 20% in the higher zone. So that also fit in with the whole idea of building the base.
That's perfect. Exactly what you've been saying. It's just another way to say it, but run for a minute, walk for 4 minutes. That's exactly the same, 20%, 80%. So yeah.
So also one of the things with people starting off with running, so the first thing they look at is the shoes. So you told us now how to approach that first. How much does shoes matter initially?
Yeah, this is a good topic. So there's an overemphasis that the shoes play in a risk of injury. There's no definitive recipe to get the shoes to choose a running shoe that is going to prevent injuries. So that's why in all those they say anti-pronation shoes prevent for most people, but we do know it's not a very small amount of people do need some structure in their shoes. So that's a metric that has become less applicable in selecting running shoes, especially for people starting off with. The one metric that does seem to have some stronger, I think it's the metric that has the strongest evidence. It's not perfect, but it's the best metric to go by for what we have to select a shoe that will run and try and help you reduce the risk of injury, let's rather say it like that, is comfort while running in the shoe. Now, the reason for that is based on very good studies that they did, but the reason for that is that the body is adapted to move in a certain way. We refer to it as your preferred movement path. So you are designed, and at this stage, even if you start running, the body always selects the path of least resistance. And then it's used to run, it's going to follow that path, and the body is going to be conditioned in that path. If you put a shoe on that complements this preferred movement path, meaning it fits into the pattern perfectly, you can run your normal stride, there's path of least resistance that your body selects at this stage, then it's going to feel quite comfortable because you're going to forget you wear a shoe. If the shoe is uncomfortable, then it means there's a bit of a disruption. It might load a structure that hasn't been conditioned to running more to running, and it will be overloaded very easily. So that's the mechanism that they think where shoes play a part in injuries. One good variable that we see a lot is the change on heel to toe drop. So the heel to toe drop, there's a difference with most shoes, the height of the heel and the height of the forefoot. So that's usually 8 mils, 10 mils. 8 mils is usually the most road running shoes are around about there. If you make a sudden change from, let's say, 8 mils to a 0 drop shoe that has flat sole, the heel and the forefoot is at the same height, now suddenly your calf is at a little bit of a lengthened position, the calf and the Achilles. It hasn't been adapted to do to run at this specific length. So now it might be that every time when you run a certain distance, it reaches its threshold a lot earlier because the length of the calf you haven't been adapted to use and contract at that 8 times body weight impact forces, and then Achilles starts getting angry with you, get a bit of a calf strain, and so forth. So the heel to toe drop is a good example. So getting back to your question is, what do we do? So I suggest people that come in for an assessment, and I said, if there's nothing major going on, certain flags popping up, and we have to look at foot biomechanics that might need a further investigation or maybe some sort of structure in the shoe, I say, here's a list of 5 shoes. You can even go to the running store and select 5 shoes, put them on, run in them in the store, and the one that stands out in terms of comfort, that's the shoe that you go with. That's the best metric for a beginner to choose a running shoe.
So I just want to get that straight. So let's say I want to run. I'm not a runner, but I want to start running. I literally go to my closest running shop and try 5 neutral shoes. So And because if I do the 10 to 12 weeks, I should, in a comfortable shoe, be able to do 5Ks in about 3 to 4 months. Am I getting you correct?
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah. So for most people, obviously there's
Little
cases
caveats
where
this side and that.
there's people that really struggle to get the right shoe. They do everything, follow that, tick all the boxes, run in the most comfortable shoe. It feels fantastic, but the needles are still there.
But 80% of people should be able to run like that, and the others should come and see you if they feel uncomfortable after
it's
week, 2 weeks, 5 weeks.
I would say if you make a change in the shoes and you see a noticeable difference in your if you have been running with a shoe. So let's first say there's two scenarios. One, you have been running a certain shoe and you make a change and then niggles start. Or you've never run before and you get a shoe and niggles start. So the first one is if there was a change and niggles start and you can correlate it to changing the shoe, then we have a look at that and say, okay, but what's the difference? Even in my analysis, then I sometimes tell people, bring the new shoe and bring the old shoe, put you on the treadmill with both of them and see what happens. If there's a significant difference, then we might change back to a shoe that's closer to the old shoe. For people that's starting off, and I think most of the cases it's not the shoe's fault. That's why I said I tend to be very cautious of talking to shoes because there might be a risk of exaggerating the role the shoe plays in running injuries. But if your body's not adapted to running at all, it should get conditioned with what you put on your feet. If there is a niggle that popped up, we have to we always look at the other things, biomechanics, training load, management. Did you do too much too quickly? Or was it something else that might maybe put you at risk? So we look at that first, and then the shoe is usually last. That doesn't say that the details aren't important. There are some cases with certain injuries, people might benefit from running in a certain shoe, but in those cases, sometimes I work with certain very good podiatrists, send them to them and ask them to rather have a look and test. That's more their field and give a bit of indication. A lot of the running shoes stores in Cape Town do a really good job of having a look at people where they don't just prescribe a shoe to make a sale, but they actually try and look and go through the effort to see what you're comfortable at and how you run in the store. So some of the stores are actually quite good at just adding some nuance and having a look at the individual standing in front of them. Yeah. So, but I think a good starting point, yes, like you said, to simplify it, go to the running store, get five long distance running shoes and run with them in the store. Don't stand in them. They're all designed to feel fantastic to stand in, but run in them and choose the one that stands out in terms of comfort.
Yeah, so no more excuses. Comfortable shoes and start slow.
Yeah. So the other thing I get asked a lot about shoes is carbon-plated shoes. So that is a hot topic at the moment. Started with Nike's Vaporfly, and they found like there's a good improvement in running economy and performance. That's still being researched for all the other shoes. It's that looks like there's about like anything between a 2 and a 5% improvement in running economy. Early studies in this, I say early, this is a very new thing. I think we're 7 years in with the presence of these shoes, but early studies show that faster runners benefit more. I did come across a conversation the other day that new research coming out. I didn't find the paper when I looked last time, but I said there might actually be more of a benefit for slow runners with carbon-plated shoes. However, I usually say with a beginner, don't even bother with that at this stage. It's the best thing now for a beginner starting off is just get a normal shoe. The prices are better. It will last you a lot longer, and you
percentage-wise, you're just going to get much more improvement from getting fitter, improving your style and things like that. And then at a certain level, then if you need that extra 2 to 5%, it might make sense.
Exactly. Yeah. If you're well developed and you've been running for a year or two and you're running like a half marathons and you feel like you want to start getting competitive, like maybe in your club and you're like in the top 10, you want to break into the top 5 of your running club and everyone's running with carbon-plated shoes, then you follow the same recipe. Go to the store, select a few of the different models, run in them, and see which one feels the comfortable. Or if you have a shoe that you have been training in, what feels similar to that shoe. And then if you are a more experienced runner and you do start running with a carbon plated shoe, then I usually say give yourself time to adapt to it. In most people, there's some changes in the biomechanics that takes a bit of getting used to as well. So don't buy them a week before a marathon and run the marathon. You do want to get used to it.
So I think most of our clients would probably not want to become professional runners. So is there a benefit for people like that to also to go for a running evaluation in general? Or is that more for people that's more serious about their running? What do you find in your practice?
So I usually say the beginners, if you're beginning with the running, the people that get a lot of benefit from those sessions tend to be people that are moving over from not running to they started running now, but they want to really get all this information, what shoes, what training, where am I weak so I can get stronger. They benefit a lot from having an assessment. The reason for that is the assessment looks at two things, or the assessments that I do look at two things. We look at can we solve problems either in performance of with your running or risk of injury. The performance side of things includes it's not just how fast I run, is how fast can I run my 5K instead of 32 minutes. I want to break under 30 minutes. But it's also I want to run longer distances and be more comfortable. Then with the risk of injury or dealing with injuries, we also have a look. Is there something happening in the biomechanics that might influence your running efficiency? So you have a bit of instability around the hips, causing a certain drop. Means like you're spending a little bit more time on the ground. You're not getting that explosiveness off the ground. We identify that and we decide, okay, we can maybe intervene with this. Mainly with exercises, strengthening weak areas. That's most effective, most easily applicable. But we can also do some running gait retraining in very extreme cases. I usually don't jump to that because it's quite invasive, I would say, changing your gait because you're trying to teach someone to run different to what they have become accustomed to. And while you're practicing it, it's a long process, can take anything from 4 weeks to 3 months. While you're practicing, your efficiency might actually go a little bit down. But specifically with certain injuries, there's benefit in dealing with that. So if you're a beginner, have a certain niggle, but you're also not running the distance you want to run, that's usually a good thing to. The running analysis is very effective in identifying weak areas, and then you can just structure your running profile, I would say, like how should I train? All the training load metrics that we talked about, how many times a week you're running, at what paces do I have to run, and at what volumes I have to run. That we do in the assessment as well. It's usually,
that's very good to know because I think a lot of people might think that going to a running coach is only for the elite, but obviously it's not. It's prevention and just to make it more comfortable.
No, so working with a coach, and there's really good coaches that I do work with as well. The training load management part is if you only do one thing, that's the best thing you can do. Get a coach that's experienced, start working with them, and learn the process. So I usually tell people, so I do running coaching, but I do coach injured runners mainly back to running pain-free. But my instruction is usually say, over this next few months that we are doing that, see how we're doing it. We're going to find out the recipe that works for you so that you can apply it yourself. But that's the other thing is working with some guidance. That's the one area. The running assessment, getting back to your regional question, we cover that as well and give you some guidelines of essentials that you have to take into account if you want to do it yourself. In conjunction with the biomechanics side, which I mentioned, where are you weak? We can make you stronger so you can run more comfortable and run easier and run better. And that's the benefit. That's why I say the recreational beginner runner benefits a lot more from that. The elites usually are quite well conditioned, and when they do come see me, their analysis and their reports are looking brilliant. But then we just see one little thing that stands out. Say, okay, there's an opportunity. Your gym work, we're going to focus on power more than strength of your of your knee. It seems like we can get a bit of economy there. So it's a little bit more nitpicking, a little bit more attention to detail and type of thing.
And just for the listeners out there, what does an assessment like this look like? Because you showed that report before we started with the podcast, and I was flabbergasted at the amount of information you get from that. But it's actually quite non-invasive, as I understand.
Yeah. So a typical assessment, let's say it's a non-injured runner. So most people that I see come for running-related injuries, then we assess everything related to the injury. But if you're just coming in, you want to see, where am I strong, where am I weak, what can I do better? We start off, you come in, you see me, we have a good chat about everything you're running, about your running history. How many times a week are you running? What paces are you feeling comfortable at? Are you recovering enough? Are you, what other sports are you doing, and what's your goals? So basically have a discussion to determine where are you now, where do you want to be, and how are we going to get there. After that, we assess. Then we have a look at certain fundamental metrics that we know is important in running biomechanics and conditioning, or let's say running conditioning. So for mobility, we'll have a look at hip and ankle mobility. That's two joints you want to really be quite mobile or mobile enough to be able to run normally uninterrupted. However, very interesting enough as well, at the other side of the spectrum, if you are too flexible, it can reduce your running economy and your risk of injury. So if you get a few people that I've had, I think I had one this week as well, where they are hypermobile, always have been. And when we assess them, we see, there's too much range here. I've told people we need to make it a little bit stiffer. The reason for that is one big metric, sorry, I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but one big metric for running performance is something we call leg spring stiffness or vertical stiffness. So your ankle, your knee, and your hip, the muscles and the tendons around that are elastic by nature. So if you're hitting the ground with those impact forces, let's say the quad muscle, let's use it around the knee. The quad and the quad tendon is basically gets pulled and then it recoils like elastic band would. Okay, it's similar to that old test that you did with the reflex test on the tendon.
Yeah.
So that's one that mechanism of energy storage and release when it stretches up and it shoots back. That basically then makes your leg a spring that bounces off the ground. A stiffer spring bounces further than a worn out spring. So if you're hypermobile, you can't get that recoil off the ground, and your muscles have to work harder to actually contract, because it's a combination of the elastic recoil and the muscle contraction. Then you're over-reliant on the muscle contraction, but also the joints, the impact on the joints may not be absorbed as efficiently, and it might increase the risk of injury. So anyway, that's the flexibility. So we do a couple of flexibilities to see where you are. Then we have a look at muscle strength. There's 4 muscle groups that works a lot. It's your calves, quads, hammies, glutes. The muscle that works the most in your leg when running is actually the soleus. It's the deeper calf muscle. It works about at 7.7 times. I think that's one study that found your body weight impact forces. So we test the muscles that are involved in. We're interested in how strong these muscles are, but it's not predictive. An isolated muscle strength is not predictive of running performance. What I'm interested in this assessment is there any compensations and patterns? Have you been using one muscle group more than the other? And is there maybe benefit in strengthening the hips more to get the hips more involved, not let the knees do everything? After that, we put you on the treadmill, and this is...
So these tests are on a machine, or you...
Yeah, so I use a handheld dynamometer for the strength testing. And the mobility test is just angles that we measure. And for the explosive testing that we do a little bit more advanced testing, we use force plates, or I've got some video tools that actually can also measure the height and the forces and the rate of force dependence of the explosive tests.
Okay.
Yeah. The treadmill test is where we actually have a look at how you run. So you run for a couple of, we warm up a bit, and when you've warmed up, put some sensors on your shoes, put a sensor on your lower back, which measures and captures your data of the motion of your feet and the forces going through your feet. Very nice. There's accelerometers and gyros and those type of sensors in there. And then I combine it with a video analysis. Use a GoPro for the low frame rate and stabilizer, and afterwards I measure the angles to see at what angles are you hitting the ground, to identify stuff like overstride, the knee angle, or the stance width that might be too narrow, or the knee rotating in, anything like that we can work on. It's all evidence-based. We try and look at things that we know has some research behind it in terms of it's things that you can look at, both for the performance side and for the injury risk side. I do have to say though, is it's not predictive of injury. It doesn't mean if you are pronating in your foot or your knees falling in, you're going to get injuries there. There's no, it's not predictive. But if you do have injuries, we know certain biomechanical things can make you more susceptible to get this type of injury. Like, for example, we know with shin splints, there is some correlation between the stance width. If you're running basically in a line or you're crossing the midline of your body, it can put a little bit of strain on the medial shin and make it a bit more susceptible. That's just one example. But anyway, that's what we have a look at. So we combine the data from the sensors and the video analysis, and we get a picture of how you run. And then we can identify, right, you have a bit of an overstride. We know if you're landing with your foot in front of you, you're actually braking yourself a little bit, so it's not very efficient. So let's maybe see, can we address why you're doing that, either by strengthening, let's say, the hips, or doing a little bit of explosive plyometric type of exercises to, or change your gait by maybe running at a little bit faster cadence or something like that.
Do you do this all in real time, or do you gather the information in one session, review it, and then give feedback?
So the most of the intro, I give feedback as we capture the data.
Okay.
Just the video analysis I usually have to do afterwards, because I have to go look at
And in general, what time frame, how long does the assessment take?
The assessment is, you get a short version. This is just basically where I only look at your strength and your running gait to identify areas where you can apply strength training. It's an hour assessment. That's usually for people that just want to run stronger. I say, let's do this assessment. Let's have a look at your running gait, but we need to test your strength as well. It just colors in the picture and gives us a good idea of what's happening when you're running. Then I have a full analysis as well. It's about an hour and a half. We look at everything. We have the discussion on your training load. We discuss shoes and maybe see what type of shoes you can try out and work better for you. And then we do all the above that I said no. Yeah.
Interesting. Awesome. Yeah. I want to get back a little bit towards the shoes, because a lot of people wanting to start running, everyone's got a pair of running shoes, or tackies as we call them in South Africa, in their cupboard. When do you know not to use them? So which ones do you need to throw out and get new ones? Or let's say you've got a pair of running shoes, they've been lying there for 2 years. Would you say get something new and start off, or would you rather say use those old ones, start with because I mean people will ask that question. Well, do you use those or do you get new ones?
I do get asked that question, and my answer differs actually. So some people, I say, let's start you off with these shoes, just get you going. Yeah. So as long as it's a running shoe, it has some grip, it has some cushioning, and it feels comfortable to run in, then it's fine. But if it's really worn out, then I say let's rather invest in something, something that's a little bit more appropriate. There's no, besides the reason why I say there's no cookie cutter advice that I give is some people can get away with everything. I have people that run like with shoes that has 1,600 kilometers on them, and they're still fine.
They can almost run in the cardboard box that it comes in, and they'll still be fine.
It's people that run comrades barefoot. So, I mean, I'm going to tell them they're wearing the wrong shoes. That's the thing. So, yeah, or the shoes are old. No, so it differs from person to person. When you're starting from scratch, if you have a decent running shoe that you know is a running shoe, it feels comfortable to wear and to run in, then you can start with that. And when you start to get comfortable with running, then maybe that's a good idea to invest in that. It's easier with injured people. If the injured people say that I think my shoes play a part here, I can't run a kilometer. If we are so we start with rehabilitation of the injury up to where they can do this run walk program. I say, okay, we're not going to have a look at your running gait now because you still have a lot of compensations from the pain that you've had. So your body is very good at changing your gait and your biomechanics to get rid of the pain. So let's get comfortable running first, and then we look at your gait, and then we decide what shoes on. Because then if you select shoes on gait that is actually a bit of a compensation because of the injury that you're dealing with, it might not be maybe a few months later. 300%. Yeah, but it's very rare that happens.
Just a question regarding injuries and running. Trail runners versus road runners, do you see a difference between them?
In the types of injuries, yes, but it's the same injuries for different reasons sometimes. So let's say for example, both road runners and trail runners get ITB injuries. Road runners tend to get it when they run with the downhill running, especially I've had one or two cases that I can quickly think of. At the end of a race, UTCT, going down a hill, fatigue legs, the ITB gets exposed because the fatigue, the biomechanics isn't maybe perfect and so forth. Road runners, ITB can also be an overuse injury, just too much mileage and too much increase. So that's the difference there. There is some more acute injuries are more common with trail runners. People sprain their ankles a lot more often, so that's more the acute side of things. But no, the injuries.
And do you know impact forces?
Yeah, so yes, that's a good point. So the impact forces on road tends to be higher or harder on the joints because it's more about the repetitiveness of road running. This is now, I'm basing this on my clinical observations and experience. So people tend to find like, but this is harder on my knees. And when they run on the trail, they say it's much better. So the surface is softer, but in most of the cases, it's because the surface changes every time. You're not loading the knee the same
exactly the same way over and over.
A bit of variation. So a lot of the rehab we say, we test it out. We say, look, we're more comfortable on the road or on the trail, so let's maybe get you back into running using trail first. Some people, for example, they find the change of the surface or the instability or the stability requirements of trail running really flares my niggle up a bit. So it's okay, well, let's stick on the road. Let's do our run walk on the road and just get comfortable doing the distance. So it can go, either way. Or let's rather say it like that. I have had cases where I prescribe one or the other.
And it's quite interesting how the exercise world is seen running, because it used to be the thing for everyone to do. Then it became cross training. Then everyone was cycling to take the load off the joints. But running is really a good thing. I mean, it's something everyone can do. You don't have to be an Olympic runner, and it's actually cheap if you think about it. You need to put on a pair of shoes and there you go. So I do think, I mean, Shaun said it, there's no tablet that you can take that is as good as exercise. So if you can just get people moving, and I think that's the message for me is start slow and do some time on the road. That's the main thing. So
yeah, and also what I learned today as well is that you might think that it's only for elite athletes, but obviously the earlier in your running career, if you can put it that way, you can amend stuff and you can prevent injury. So it's actually for exactly our clientele type of the guys that should see you. So the ones that want to start running and they just want to prolong that running life cycle. So where can they find you if someone wants to get a hold of you to do a running assessment?
Yeah, they're welcome to go have a look at my website. It's runningsmart.co.za, or they can send me an email, hannes@runningsmart.co.za. More than welcome to give me a shout, even if you just have questions. Yeah, give me a...
And do you do the assessments at both centers?
Yes,
in Cape Town
both
and
centers.
Durbanville?
On my website, there's online diary. You can choose either Durbanville or Cape Town.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. I mean, I'm not a runner, and I feel like I want to go running now.
That's good.
No, thanks again for your time coming out here.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Disclaimer. This podcast is not intended as a substitute for the advice of your healthcare provider. No doctor-patient relationship has been formed through this podcast. The content here is for information purposes only.